In 1990, President George Bush and U.S. governors generated a list of 6 goals for U.S. schools to reach by 2000, and the National Goals Panel was established to determine the nation's progress in meeting these goals. First, all U.S. children will start school ready to learn. Second, the high school graduation rate will increase to at least 90%. Third, U.S. students will leave grades 4, 8, and 12 having demonstrated competency in challenging subject matter such as English, mathematics, science, history, and geography. U.S. students will rank first in world in science and mathematics achievement. Fifth, every adult American will be literate and possess the knowledge and skills necessary to compete in a global economy and to exercise citizenship's right and responsibility. And lastly, every U.S. school will be free of drugs and violence and will offer a disciplined environment conducive to learning. Like aims, goals should address the current times but also be relevant for the future. Creating educational goals is an ongoing activity. The needs of students, society, and a particular community give rise to the initial statement of curriculum goals. The goals are sometimes rank ordered in terms of importance, feasibility, or both. However, sometimes goals deemed desirable and feasible by non-educators as nothing described ridiculous, not even remotely possible to be obtained. Take, for instance, the list of 6 goals for U.S. schools to reach by 2000. All of these goals were unattainable and still, in this century, have not been achieved. In generating goals also, it should be defined by educators knowledgeable about schooling, curriculum theory, curriculum development, and curriculum evaluation. Certainly, educators can seek advice from community members and even students as to the appropriateness of identified goals. If agreement is reached, then goals are acceptable by those who are creating and delivering the curriculum. When creating curriculum goals, individual needs to know the following. First, federal and state mandates regarding education. Second, the specific students who are to receive the planned curriculum. Third, the expected competencies and understandings expected of the learners. Fourth, educational environment and situation that will enable the goals to be attained. Fifth, the standards of performance and comprehensions that are expected from students who have experienced the newly created curriculum. Next is how are we going to generate objectives? Within the context of educational aims and goals, it is necessary to formulate more specific objectives. Whereas aims and goals are long-term and objectives are short-term. So I have here the guidelines for formulating the objectives. When creating objectives, educator should consider how well they match the stated goals and aims. A standard must relate more specifically to an objective. To fine-tune this objective, educators must identify the content standard, that is, define the procedural knowledge that must be demonstrated, and then indicate the performance or skill level or level that must be attained. Another guidelines for formulating objectives is that standards, and particularly national standards, assume that all students, all communities, all teachers, and all school districts are alike and that they face the same challenges, possesses the same values, and have students of the same intellectual abilities, the same intellectual interest, the same behavioral disposition, and the same cultural and ethnic backgrounds. Another guideline is that objectives should be clearly expressed, easy to understand, and agreed on. The next guidelines for formulating objectives is to determine appropriateness. Educators must consider students' needs and the content to be covered. Some objectives might be inappropriate because they demand behavior that students are incapable of attaining or because they do not consider students' interest. Some objectives might be better suited to students in a particular subject who have unique aspirations than to students with other motivations. A fourth guideline for formulating objectives is that they should be grouped logically so as to make sense when units of instruction and evaluation are being determined. The fifth guideline is that objectives require periodic revision. The sixth guideline is that useful objectives enable students to proceed to the next part of a unit plan or lesson plan. The last factor to consider is an objective's legality. Regarding legality, there is and there must be a standardization of a standard so that there is a compliance with federal and state mandates. Some mandates require that all students be taught certain material such as state history or basic mathematics. Let us now proceed to the types of objectives. Educational objectives range from the objectives for specific curriculum areas or often subjects or courses at a particular grade levels to specific outcomes of classroom instruction. Abby Brown and Timothy Green note that an instructional objective should clearly indicate some observable or quantifiable student behavior. Here we have the types of objectives. First, the behavioral objectives. Most educators and the general public believe that educational objectives should be couched in terms of observable or measurable achievement. The next type is non-behavioral general objectives. The advocates of these non-behavioral objectives use words such as appreciate, know, and understand. They believe stating objectives too specifically restricts learning to measurable achievement. The next type is cognitive objectives. In 1956, Benjamin Bloom introduced us to the taxonomy of educational objectives, the cognitive domain. In his taxonomy, he divided cognitive learning into knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. In 2001, the revision created a grid for generating objectives that address the knowledge and cognitive process dimension. Attending to these two dimensions, the knowledge and process allows educators to formulate objectives that considered not only the type of content to be taught, but also the cognitive strategies intended. The next type of objectives is the multi-purpose objective. This objective addresses three knowledge dimensions: factual, conceptual, and procedural knowledge. The next type of objective is affective objectives. David Gratwell and others have broken affective objectives into 5 levels of achievement. Each level depends on attainment of the previous level: the receiving, responding, valuing, organization, and characterization. The next type of objectives is psychomotor objective. The psychomotor domain has received much less emphasis than the cognitive and affective domain. So we have types of affective domain are the reflex, fundamental, perceptual, physical, skill, and non-discursive.